session, you've had a brief introduction to our panelists, but we're going to just hear a bit about each of them, and then we're going to flip the program from the last session, and you all have some questions, and you're going to raise your hand and ask some questions of the panelists, and we'll take the direction of the conversation from there. Bien? Así que bienvenidos ustedes. Empezamos contigo, ¿ok?
Sorry. Hi everyone, my name is Mora, and I graduated from York in 2009. After York, I went to Cornell where I studied French literature. I often tell people that felt like 4 years of therapy because I was studying, post-colonial literature, which at its core is very actually similar to the questions that I had about my experience with my identity being from Oaxaca, from an indigenous community, right? So often when I tell people that I don't speak Mixteco, they're like, why don't you go down there and learn Mixteco, right? And this is literally the question that all of these post-colonial writers had, we now speak French, what do we do about this? Do we go back and learn our native languages, knowing full well that was kind of like a futile feat because no one speaks it, right? Not even the people who are in these regions speak it anymore. Since moving back from undergrad, I've been working in the area for various nonprofits, and now I work for the Attorney Honorary, and I'll stop there.
Hello, I'm Velásquez. Some of you may recognize me as the CIEE guy, but today I'm here representing my heritage. I'm Afro-Chicano. On my father's side, we're Chicano, so my grandparents immigrated from Chiapas and Sonora. And yeah, really glad to talk to you guys about my identity. I think it's a really complex word, identity. I don't know if I should just repeat exactly what I said last time, kind of thinking a scripted thing. I think, identity is a big word for me. My whole life I've been asked, what are you? Has anybody ever been asked that question before? What are you? Yeah, I'm a human being. That's what I like to say usually, but then I also get a follow-up question, where are you from? Well, I'm from California. And sometimes people get a weird look on their face, you're not playing the game that I usually be playing. I'm like, okay, you want to know why I'm the color I am, or why I have the features that I have, and why my hair is the way it is. That's what you're actually asking. So Jenny said earlier, our words are really important. And I think when people ask me questions like that, I'm elevate your speech a little bit. Think a little bit before you ask me a question like that. And I'm happy to talk it out, but I need a little bit more nuance when someone's asking questions like that. So just about identity, I think it has to do with how people perceive you, your genetics and how they're expressed, physically, what you think of yourself, and also what's been passed down to you by your grandparents, your parents, all that kind of stuff. So I'm happy today to talk about that complex word of identity with y'all.
Great. Okay, my name is Blanche from the ranch. I grew up on a ranch, still live on a ranch. I call it ranch, no. I want you young adults to understand how fortunate you are to be here. In this place right now, there are people your age who have died in Ukraine. There are people your age who didn't eat dinner last night. There are so many other options out there in the world. And I don't mean that you should feel guilty for this, but take advantage of it. I mean, you're in a great spot right here for learning. Look at this nature. Not everybody has this view, Detroit, you've got a bunch of buildings and smoke and smog and everything else. So I would appreciate you if you wouldn't talk, please, while I'm speaking. Thank you very much. And so what I am is really a personification of democracy, that you have the option to do so many things because you're in this country. Despite all the negative stuff, there's so many things you can do. And because of my background, my father came here from Mexico in 1945 as a bracero. I have a different take on things. And he never went to school, my mother never went to school. I used to clean homes with my mother. And I have tremendous sensory skills, and that's why I get perturbed when people are not taking full advantage of whatever they could hear, whatever they could see, whatever they could taste. You're not taking full advantage of your context. So, as I said in the last year, how many of you folks would love to have just a one-on-one out by the beach with somebody you trust? Just a long conversation, no cell phones, just snacks, okay? No cell phones. Are we all like lost souls? Nobody's talking to each other anymore. And I don't mean during somebody else's presentation. I mean, thank you, you're a quick learner. But I think that we have a lot of people who just don't get it about putting down the screens. And you all have close friends, and if you don't, maybe that's part of the reason. And so if you know somebody who smells okay, why don't you get to know them a little bit? And so my self-identity is Blanca. Like, you want to know who I am? You got to put in the time. I'm sorry. You can't just like Google me, figure it out. Okay, I got it sized up. I know who she is. I don't need to do anything else. You need to know what's going on in a person's heart, what's going on in a person's mind, to really get to know who they are. And so I want to know from you folks. I won't say it. From you folks. What motivates you? What is your biggest urgency today? You're not 85, but you're not going to last forever, and nobody's going to guarantee you next weekend. So what's your biggest urgency right now? Somebody, put your hand up. What's really urgent and important to you? Sir?
Economic independence.
What does that mean to you?
Personally, I believe that means to essentially live on your own terms and to have something like a ranch, like as I'm sure you would understand, like to have the sense of independence and not to sort of be boxed into a job that you don't like, to have something that sort of lets you breathe and breathe financially. And I think that especially in California, it's very hard for people to achieve that because of high taxes and also due to the fact that a lot of people find it increasingly hard to get really good quality jobs. So I think that a big wish for a lot of people is to have that freedom, that economic independence.
Sir, you had a comment?
Contribution. I want to be remembered in my life.
And how would you like to be remembered? As a person who doesn't care? As a person who cares? Who likes animals?
I have no idea.
It's okay to think about it. It's okay to think about it. Muchas gracias. I think so in spirit of contribution and participation, I want to invite our audience members to ask our panelists some questions. And then as the moderator, I have some additional questions, but we thought we would flip it from the last session and start with you. So if you have a question, please just stand up and ask our panelists here. We have 3 different perspectives. Yeah. You want to share your name?
I'm Miles. How has your self-identification as Hispanic influenced your relationships with others, both within and outside of the Hispanic community?
Do you want to start? Eric, yeah?
So I'll say that, like, you know, less so the term Hispanic, because I kind of alluded to some of the challenges that I have with the term, right? Like, again, my family does not really spoken Spanish for that many generations, right? But I think the kind of like the immigrant experience, like all of those things did kind of influence how I related to others. And when probably this memory will be a little bit closer, more relatable to you, right, in the upcoming years. But when I left York and I went to undergrad, almost all my friends were not other Hispanic people. They were all other First Generation Americans, right? And I think that wasn't intentional. I didn't go out and be like, did your parents, were they raised in America? Because otherwise we can't be friends. No, it was just, there was a mutual understanding. It was exactly what Blanca was describing in the other session, which was like, you grew up eating a soup with not all the proper ingredients, right? Like people got a little bit creative, and being able to relate to others on those terms. Some of their parents were from other countries, not from Latin America, but still there was a shared understanding of an otherness maybe that we felt growing up that made it easier for us to relate to one another. So I'd say that's how it's influenced my life, at least in undergrad. And in my work life, I think my title is Policy Analyst, which I think is really fancy and sometimes can be really ambiguous. Like, what does that actually mean? It means I read a lot, right? It means I am asked for my opinion on different topics a lot. And I often think about it, or now there's a big focus on, systems change, thinking of things not on the individual level, but how it affects people as a whole, right? And while that's certainly valuable, right, and I personal terms. In the pandemic, during the onset of the pandemic, I often thought about my mother, right? Like a Mexican immigrant who only speaks Spanish, right? When people would say like, oh, you can make an appointment to get a COVID-19 shot using this QR code. I'm like, well, first off, hold up, that's not gonna work for my mom. like she wouldn't know what to do with any of what you just said. And so that's influenced my work that way, where like I have to think about things from that perspective of who's being left out. Because I certainly wouldn't want, my mother or someone who looks like her to feel left out in these processes, right? I often think about things I was touring a few senior living facilities as part of my work a few weeks ago. And it was beautiful. It's like a beautiful sight and because I wanted to say which one. But it was beautiful. And then I asked them, like, what's the cost to live here, right? And it's like $9,000 a month. And I'm like, who can afford this, right? Like, certainly not my parents, the ag workers, who are harvesting our fruits and vegetables. So I often think about, I think my Hispanic heritage has influenced me in that way, in deeply personal terms. And I often use it to think about who's being left out. And I'll also just kind of quickly add, like Blanca alluded to this beautiful greenery that you have. Yes, you are in a position, right, that is quite, I've got to hate this term, blessed. Blessed. And I would say, I don't necessarily have a hang-up about it, but as you go out into the world, think about the many things that you had here and how you can get others from maybe less privileged positions to also, have these things. It's not about necessarily gatekeeping anything, but expanding resources that are available to all of us. Awesome.
Thank you. That was awesome. The complexity of that. I don't know if either of you would like to respond to this question, or if you would like the audience to continue with another one. Okay. Would anybody else? Yeah, Normandy.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the tiny blurbs about you guys here and just everything that these could entail. What does your work look like in a week? What do you do? Because these little 2 sentences don't feel like they describe it enough.
I think some of y'all know what I do, right? You've seen me here on your campus before. I work for a study abroad company called CIEE. I go into schools and I present the opportunity. I'm, to use a silly term, blessed to be able to do that, especially because of the robust scholarships that my organization offers. I get to go into schools and give the opportunity to people who otherwise would not be able to study abroad. We give scholarships ranging from 20% all the way to 100%. And I've been able to have conversations with families that can't believe that their kids get to go to Japan, to Korea, to Botswana, even to Argentina, which is dear to my heart. So that's what I do, and I guess how it ties into my heritage and stuff. I learned Spanish a little bit with my grandparents. I knew stuff like "Quieres que te pegue" and stuff like that from my grandparents. So I didn't know Spanish really, really well. I could understand some, but then when I was 16, I went abroad for the first time to Chiapas, and I wasn't able to have the connections that I wished that I could have with people. And I was like, okay, I need to become fluent so that I can have access to all these other ideas. And I read something really cool the other day that says language is like clothes for your ideas. So I wanted to get some more clothes for the way I thought. So I'm really glad to now be able to speak Spanish due to more abroad experiences and immersion experiences. And so when I go into schools and I talk about, go abroad so you can learn a language, it's really coming from the heart. And a part of that is because of my background. Cool question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I love the clothes for my thoughts. I'm gonna borrow that. I'm gonna be blessed to borrow that. Yeah.
I think that that's a great analogy, that the more languages you speak, the better you are at thinking, because you have more tools. I spoke Spanish before I spoke English, and I was in phonetics because I probably had an accent, quote unquote, whatever that means, when I started speaking English. I think language is like another pan that you can cook with. You have a saute pan and that's it, because all you do is speak English. Well, what if you want to boil something? And so you need as many utensils as you can. When I studied music, oh my God, how music has affected me. You learn velocity of speech. You learn intonation. You learn volume. And everybody's oblivious now. Everybody's got channel 6 and that's it. This is how I talk, so it's too bad. Wait a minute. You need to be sensitive to who you're speaking with. Maybe, people are scared of me, so I slow down and maybe fiddle with my hair, try to look kind of stupid. I mean, something, whatever it is, to get the person to open up to me. It's not about me. And so, if you can change your perspective in that way, my day-to-day, many times if somebody has been detained, I had a guy who was from Salinas who was detained in San Diego, and of course ICE, the US government, shipped him to Louisiana. Why not? We're out of beds in California. And so there's people in very horrific situations where I'm trying to negotiate their release. I'm trying to get their freedom. And we have my colleague here whose wife just got a green card. Is that public information now? I can say that. She won't get picked up now. It's cool. It's cool. She's not under the radar. And so there's so much stuff that we have. And I say, look at your point of reference. I'm not retired. Maybe I should be retired, quote unquote. I'm not thinking about my colleagues who are golfing all day. I'm sitting here thinking I have the opportunity to get people released from detention, to give them the freedom that other people can't. I am their legal oxygen as an attorney. And so I really feel a strong duty. My father was deported many times. As a bracero, I mentioned this at the county event. They would physically interview you for the job, and if you didn't have crunchy hands, they weren't going to hire you because it meant you haven't been working out in the grunt work. You have soft hands, you've probably been working inside, and so they wanted people with crunchy hands who could do the work. And so get as many tools as you can, sensory tools, linguistic tools, artistic tools. Get as many tools because you're creative. It shows your self-worth, that you have pride in yourself. And I want, when I was a kid, I spoke vernacular Spanish, which is basically ag Spanish, and I said, okay, there's not enough vocabulary here, and I want to be at the Four Seasons in Mexico City. So I started being very, very purposeful about elevating my Spanish, and I do it to this day. You have to make a conscious decision. Do you want to have a certain kind of English? There are certain kinds of English. People don't even spell the whole word anymore because we're texting so much. Do you know how to write cursive? Of course not. Why don't you write a note in cursive to one of your friends? They'll have that when they're 80 years old and say, oh my God, here's a letter from Johnny. I have those letters. They're so cool. Thank you.
Buenísimo, muchas gracias. This is way too short to honor the speakers we have today, so I just wanted to invite each of them to say any closing comments that you feel you would like to impart on our audience based on the conversations that we've had today, both in this session and the one before.
Yeah, I think maybe we didn't touch on it as much during this session as we did with the previous one, but we talked a lot in the previous one about how, the Hispanic community is really not a monolith. There's a lot of diversity within the Hispanic community. I loved what Blanca said earlier about, not settling for just checking off the various boxes that we have. And I would encourage you to, walk away from this with that same mentality. We've heard from 3 people, right? We spoke about their lives, but really those are our lives, right? Our experiences. You can speak to 3 other people, right, on the street in Monterey County and get vastly different answers. So always be open to learning more about other people. I'll also share this, you had asked earlier, what does your day-to-day look like? I often tell people that for me, it's a lot of reading up on different things that are happening in Monterey County. And it can be really boring, but then I think about it again in terms of people, right now, or this weekend, one of the things that I read up on was whether the health department should allow for home kitchens to be permitted. New law now is allowing that to happen. It's not pretty boring, right? But then I was thinking, who actually would file for these types of permits? Oh, it's people who don't have enough money to, have a kitchen. And it often will be the Hispanic entrepreneur, right? And so I'm like, okay, now I'm going to be more interested. Now I'm going to get more invested in this topic that otherwise would have But another thing that I often do is deal with constituents, right? I just had one who called our office, right, and basically said, like, I'm here to complain about, and I won't say what the exact words that he said, but he was complaining about the pride flag that was up in the city of Marina over the summer. And I lead a pride organization, so it's particularly hurtful, right, to hear these like very charged words. And in the moment, I really wanted to yell back. I'm like, I have this habit. I'm gonna go show up to this old man's house and give him a piece of my mind. But now I took a breath, I walked my dog, picked up the phone, called him, right? And I was like, I'm here to talk to you about your concerns regarding the pride flag. First of all, it's a city issue, not the county. But let's talk about it. What is your problem with it? At the end of it, I was bracing myself to like full on verbally fight this man. Actually, he turned out to be much more pleasant than I was expecting him to be. He was like, oh, I just, I think there should be separation of church and state. I'm like, valid, but also it's not a church, right? Like, it's not a church flag. And by the end of it, we talked for maybe an hour and a half. By the end of the conversation, we didn't arrive at an agreement. He didn't suddenly turn around and was like, I love your people. That's not what happened. I'm sure he still felt the exact same way he felt at the beginning of the conversation. But at least we both got our truths out in a way that was still kind of somewhat amicable, right? So again, I would encourage you to speak through difference. That's not to say you have to compromise, right? Like I often get really frustrated when people romanticize compromise and they're like, oh, we can arrive at a happy medium. I'm like, sir, you're saying that I'm not like a human. what's the little point in that, right? But always, be open-minded and again, speak to people who may be different than yourself.
Yeah, real quick, I think my big takeaway would be like multi-sectionality. Like I said earlier, I'm Afro-Chicano. My Afro-ness does not make me any less Chicano. My Chicano-ness does not make me any less Latino. I am Latino, but I am an American. Those two things do not eliminate each other. I can be both at the same time. You guys are all young, but soon you're going to be voting. So you're young, but you also hold power. So think about all those different ways. One thing doesn't become mutually exclusive. We're all complex individuals and acknowledge the complexity in others. And it goes back to what's been said by both of my colleagues up here. Like, don't take stuff at face value. Ask good questions and be open to hear the answers. Hear them, not just listen. Hear them.
I'll be very quick. Going back to the comment on independence, education is power. It's independence. Please. I was a tax attorney at Bank of America in San Francisco, and I dumped them. I said, I have other options. So you need options. You want to be painting pictures on the beach, make it so you can do that. So find long-term solutions. Also, please park your emotions. Learn to park your emotions. Somebody ticked you off, save it. Somebody made you really happy. I used to be a walking piñata. If anybody made me happy, I'd like spaz out, like, ah! Now it's like, oh, nice. You need to learn to park your emotions, because it may not be the best time to really be however you feel. And become independent through education. That's how I did it. Please, there's no other option. I mean, some kids, I'm like, what are you thinking about? You can either pick strawberries, work at McDonald's, or go to school. Is it really that complicated? Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. With the school, with an email, with your permission, with your emails, if any of you would like to reach out directly to have those personal conversations. So thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of your day. Muchas gracias. ¿Sí?